My name is Aubrey. I'll never forget the moment my father, Henry Thompson, looked me in the eye at his retirement party and said, "That seat is for my real daughter. Get out." It was as if a part of me died right then and there. I was wearing a red dress that had once belonged to my mother, Grace. She'd worn it to their 25th wedding anniversary before a sudden heart attack took her away. I wore it that night to honor my father, to show him that I still cared, even after 3 long years of silence. As I hit the hardwood floor, I could feel the eyes of 80 people on me. The humiliation was unbearable. But what my father didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that the real daughter he'd just handed my seat to, Lily, had been embezzling from him for the past 9 months. And my husband, Ethan, had the proof right in his jacket pocket. Let me take you back to the beginning. My father, Henry, was a respected architect. He spent 38 years designing some of the most beautiful buildings in our city. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. Every weekend, he'd take me to construction sites, showing me the intricacies of building structures. He'd point at a beam and say, "See how that supports the weight, Aubrey? It's the invisible things that hold everything together." I was 10 years old then, and I didn't fully understand what he meant, but I listened intently. My mother, Grace, was a schoolteacher. She had a heart of gold and a smile that could light up a room. She worked during the day, so she could be home when I got back from school. She'd cook dinner while singing off key, and our small apartment would fill with the warm smell of her delicious food. Our family revolved around a small cherry wood table that my father had built when I was born. There were 3 chairs, one for each of us. No extras, no missing pieces, my father used to say. When I was 13, my mother passed away suddenly. It was a shock to all of us. My father didn't show his grief openly, but I could see the pain in his eyes. He kept going to work, kept making dinner, and kept sitting at that cherry wood table across from me. My mother's chair remained empty, and I never had the heart to ask him to move it. 3 years later, my father told me he'd met someone. He said she'd never replace my mother, and I believed him. Her name was Isabella Reed. She was a wealthy socialite, always dressed in designer clothes and wearing expensive jewelry. She had a daughter, Lily, who was 3 years younger than me. My father introduced them to me over dinner at our apartment. Isabella brought a bottle of wine that probably cost more than a month's rent. In the beginning, she tried to be nice. She asked about my school, complimented the curtains my mother had chosen. She even offered to teach me how to drive, but I declined. I already had my learner's permit. They got married when I was 16. It was a small, private ceremony. Isabella wore a white silk dress, and I wore a simple blue dress that my mother had bought me for my 15th birthday. After the wedding, things started to change. Isabella replaced the cherry wood table with a large, marble dining set. "It's more modern," she said. My father just nodded in agreement. The old table was moved to the storage room. On the first Thanksgiving after the wedding, I came downstairs to find that my chair, the one my father had carved my initials into, was gone. "We needed a matching set," Isabella said, smoothing a linen napkin on the new table. Lily moved in full time around then. She took over my old room, which Isabella redecorated with pink wallpaper and a new vanity. Lily was 13, chatty and eager to please. She started calling my father Dad right away, and my father, who hadn't shed a tear since my mother's funeral, got teary-eyed and hugged her at the dinner table. I watched from the kitchen doorway, silent. That was my first mistake. I left for college at 19. I got a full scholarship to study architecture at a prestigious university. My father drove me to campus, helped me carry my boxes, and stood in the parking lot for a long time after I told him I'd be fine. Isabella stayed home, saying she had a headache. Every time I came back for a break, something else had changed. My mother's photos were moved from the living room wall to the hallway, then to a box in the attic. Her books and mementos disappeared from my room. The small garden my mother had planted on the balcony was replaced with artificial plants. I met Ethan at an architecture conference when I was 26. He was a forensic accountant specializing in financial fraud cases. We talked for hours about how numbers can lie and how buildings are built on truth. We got married 2 years later at a courthouse with just a few close friends and family. My father walked me down the aisle, but Isabella developed a headache during the toasts, and they left before we cut the cake. The last time my father looked me in the eye, we were standing outside the courthouse. He squeezed my hand and said, "Your mother would have been proud of you." That was 4 years ago, 3 years before the retirement party. I was working on a large-scale building project in another city when Christmas rolled around. The project was behind schedule, and there were some structural issues that needed to be fixed. I couldn't leave until everything was sorted out. I called my father on December 23rd to explain. I got his voicemail and left a message. "Hey, Dad. I'm stuck at work. I'm so sorry I can't make it home for Christmas. I'll come in January. I love you. Merry Christmas." I didn't get a call back. I thought he was disappointed. I texted him on Christmas morning, but there was no reply. I called again on New Year's Day, and Isabella answered. Her voice was cold and flat. "Aubrey, your father doesn't want to talk to you right now. You should respect that." So I did. I gave him space. I called him every week for the next 3 years, 152 calls in total, and sent 45 texts. Not a single response. I never stopped trying, but I also never went to the house and demanded answers. Twice I tried, but Isabella met me at the door, arms crossed, saying the same thing. "He doesn't want to see you, Aubrey. Please stop making this harder than it has to be." I could have pushed past her, caused a scene, but my pride got in the way. I thought if my father wanted to cut me out of his life, I'd let him. It would break my heart, but I'd let him. 8 weeks before the retirement party, Ethan got a phone call from a woman named Mrs. Jenkins. She worked in the human resources department at my father's company. She said she needed to talk to Ethan about some paperwork. Ethan didn't tell me right away. The invitation to the retirement party arrived in my work email. It was sent by the company's event coordinator, a mass email to all employees' family contacts. I stared at the email for a long time. Ethan came into the kitchen, saw the screen, and sat down across from me. "You should go," he said. "He hasn't spoken to you in 3 years. This might be your only chance." I was too busy deciding what to wear. I chose the red dress, my mother's dress. I had it altered to fit me, but the fabric still carried the faint scent of her perfume. I wore it for my father because my mother couldn't be there, and I wanted a part of her to be at the party. Ethan drove me to the country club where the party was held. It was a beautiful place, with crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and a stage with a large photo of my father shaking hands with the company's CEO. I found the seating chart near the entrance. My name wasn't on the head table. Henry Thompson, Isabella Thompson, Lily Reed, and 3 of my father's colleagues were listed. My aunt, Rose, was seated at the table farthest from the front, near the kitchen. I should have turned around then, but I'd spent 3 years wondering if my father still remembered me. I needed to hear it from him, even if the answer destroyed me. Isabella met us just inside the foyer. She was wearing a black evening gown and a diamond necklace. Her smile was fake, like a mask. "Oh, Aubrey, I didn't think you'd actually come," she said. "The invitation said family," I replied. She touched my elbow and led us through the main hall, not towards the head table, but to a small table in the corner. It was a table for 2, squeezed between a pillar and a service cart. There was no nameplate, no centerpiece, just 2 chairs and a bread basket. I sat down and Ethan sat across from me. We didn't touch the bread. From there, I could see my father. He was sitting at the head table, wearing a Cartier watch that Isabella had given him for their 10th anniversary. Lily was sitting next to him, leaning on his arm, wearing a pink cocktail dress and a Tiffany bracelet. She looked like the perfect daughter. My father glanced in my direction. For a brief moment, our eyes met. I waited for some sign of recognition, guilt, or confusion, but he just turned away, back to Lily. A hand squeezed my shoulder. It was my Aunt Rose. She'd walked across the room to reach us, her reading glasses still on her head. She leaned down and whispered in my ear, "I'm glad you came, honey. There are things you need to know." She squeezed my hand and said, "They changed his will." Before I could ask her what she meant, Isabella took the stage. She tapped the microphone twice, and the room fell silent. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we celebrate the most amazing man, husband, and father, Henry Thompson, she said. The room erupted in applause. Behind her, a projector screen showed a slideshow of my father's career. Photos of him at construction sites, shaking hands with clients, and at company events. Then the family photos started. Isabella and my father on vacations, Lily and my father at sports games. There was not a single photo of me or my mother. It was as if we'd never existed. Isabella then said, "I want to give a special recognition to Henry's daughter, Lily. She's followed in his footsteps and made him so proud." Lily stood up and waved, and the guests clapped. I felt Ethan's hand tighten around mine under the table. A man approached us during the applause. He was an old colleague of my father's, Mr. Harris. He looked at me with a confused expression. "Aren't you Aubrey? Henry used to talk about you all the time. Showed us your college graduation photo. What happened?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I didn't know what had happened. The slideshow ended, and the waitstaff started serving the food. Conversations resumed. Isabella returned to the head table and placed her hand on my father's shoulder possessively. I set my napkin on the table and stood up. Ethan looked at me. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I didn't drive 4 hours to sit in a corner and eat bread," I said. I walked through the center of the room, past Mr. Harris's table, past the middle-level managers and their wives, and past the company's vice president. Everyone's eyes followed me. The head table was on a small platform, just a few inches high, but it felt like I was approaching a stage. I stepped up and stood next to the empty chair at the far left of the table. Lily saw me first. Her smile faded. I placed my hand on the back of the chair and said, "Dad." My father looked up. His jaw tightened. "It's been 3 years," I said. "Can we talk?" There was a moment of silence at the head table. Isabella leaned in and whispered something to my father. I couldn't hear what she said, but I saw his expression harden. He pushed his chair back and stood up. He was a tall man, with broad shoulders. He looked down at me, and I saw nothing but coldness in his eyes. For a split second, I thought he was going to hug me. Instead, he put his hands on my shoulders and pushed me. I stumbled backward off the platform. My heel caught on the edge, and I fell hard on the floor. The seam of my mother's dress split along the hem with a soft, tearing sound. "That seat is for my real daughter," my father said, his voice echoing through the room. "You lost the right to sit here when you turned your back on this family. Get out." I was on the floor, looking up at my father. Behind him, Lily slid into the empty chair, my chair, and settled in as if she'd been waiting for this moment. "It's okay, Dad," she said. "She can't hurt you anymore." The room was silent. No one moved, no one spoke. Forks hung in mid-air, and conversations died. I sat on the floor, feeling the cold hardwood through my mother's dress. My clutch had fallen open beside me, and there, half spilled on the floor, was a photo of me and my father at a construction site when I was 5. I was sitting on his shoulders, wearing a hard hat, and we were both laughing. I stared up at the man who had taught me about buildings, and I saw a stranger. He was so certain that he was right, thanks to Isabella's lies over the past 3 years. I put my hands on the floor and started to push myself up. I was 1 step from the door, ready to walk out and never come back. Then I heard a chair push back. It was Ethan. He stood up from our table in the corner. He buttoned his suit jacket and adjusted his cuffs. I'd seen him do this before important presentations at his firm. It meant he was about to present the facts. Isabella noticed him first. I saw a flicker of alarm in her eyes, quickly replaced by a smile. "Ethan," she called out. "I think it's best if you take Aubrey home. She's had a long night." Ethan ignored her. He walked towards me, past the center tables, past Mr. Harris, and past the guests who were watching in silence. He reached me and offered his hand. I took it, and he pulled me up. He looked at the torn hem of my mother's dress, and his jaw tightened. Then he turned towards the head table, towards my father. "Mr. Thompson," he said in a calm voice. "I'm Ethan, your daughter's husband. The daughter you just pushed to the floor." My father's face turned red. I have nothing to say to you. Take her and leave, he said. I understand, sir, but before we go, I have a question, Ethan said. When was the last time you personally checked your messages? My father blinked. What? He asked. It's a simple question, sir, Ethan said. Isabella stood up so quickly that her chair scraped the platform. Ethan, this is not the time or place, she said. Actually, Mrs. Thompson, this is exactly the time and place, Ethan replied, still looking at my father. Isabella tried to recover. She turned to the room and said, Everyone, I'm so sorry for this disruption. Please enjoy your dinners. This is Henry's night. She leaned down and whispered to my father, See? I told you she only comes around when she wants something. My father nodded, but his hand was gripping his napkin tightly. I could see the doubt in his eyes. Lily tried to fill the silence. I'm here, Dad. I'll always be here, she said, rubbing his arm. Mr. Harris spoke up from his table. That was wrong, Henry. That girl drove 4 hours to be here. My father didn't answer. Isabella lifted her champagne glass and said, To Henry and to the family that chose to stay. A few guests raised their glasses, but it was an uncomfortable toast. Isabella walked towards me. She stopped a few feet away and said in a low voice, Aubrey, sweetie, it's best if you leave quietly. You've already embarrassed your father enough. I embarrassed him? He pushed me to the floor. I said, You showed up uninvited to a private family event. If you really loved your father, you would have respected his wishes, she replied. His wishes or yours? I asked. Her smile didn't change, but her eyes went cold. Let me be clear. Henry has made his decision. His retirement, his assets, his house, everything is taken care of. You are not part of that plan. Walk away gracefully, or I'll make sure everyone here knows what kind of daughter you've been. I almost walked away. Every rational part of me told me to turn around and leave. But something she said, his assets, his house, everything is taken care of, bothered me. It sounded more like an investor protecting her portfolio than a wife protecting her husband. What kind of daughter calls her father every week for 3 years and never gets an answer? I said. Isabella's face changed for a split second. I saw a flash of surprise, quickly hidden. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. But I knew she was lying. Ethan had been waiting for this moment. He walked towards the head table with a steady pace. He stopped in front of my father and said, Mr. Thompson, before your wife calls security, I'd like to ask you one more question. When was the last time you personally reviewed your 401k beneficiary designations? The question hit my father like a punch. His expression changed from anger to confusion. My beneficiary? What does that have to do with anything? He asked. When was the last time you checked? Ethan repeated. I don't know. Years ago. Isabella handles all the paperwork, my father said. Isabella's heels clicked as she walked towards them. Henry, don't engage. He's trying to confuse you, she said. Mrs. Thompson, I already have the paperwork, Ethan said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He set it on the table in front of my